I looked in the mirror this morning, and for a terrifying second, I didn't recognize the woman staring back at me. It wasn't just the gray hair or the lines around my eyes. It was that the eyes themselves looked vacant. I have been a wife for 30 years, a mother for 28, a teacher for 25. But now the kids are gone. My husband is drifting, and I realized, I have absolutely no idea who Susan is anymore. If you stripped away all the labels, mother, wife, employee, I feel like there would be nothing left but air. That is a direct transcript from a session I had 2 weeks ago with a woman I'll call Susan. She is 56 years old, intelligent, financially stable, and deeply loved by her friends. And yet, she sat on my couch, shaking, terrified by a profound internal hollowness that seemed to have swallowed her whole. She isn't having a midlife crisis in the way the media portrays it. She isn't buying a sports car or running off to an ashram. She is suffering from something much quieter and, frankly, much more dangerous. She is experiencing the female identity shift, a psychological collapse that happens to millions of women in their 50s and 60s, often leading to severe depression, the sudden destruction of long-term marriages, and a vulnerability that predators both financial and romantic can smell from a mile away. I am telling you this because, in my years of clinical practice, specializing in female psychology and relationship dynamics, I have seen this specific silence destroy more lives than almost any other issue. It is the silent epidemic of the invisible woman. If you are feeling this, if you feel like a ghost in your own life, I need you to know that you are not crazy. You are not ungrateful, and you are not alone. But you are in a precarious position. When a woman loses her sense of self, she loses her boundaries, her intuition, and her protection. Please, I am asking you to click the like button and subscribe to this channel right now. Not for my vanity, but because we are building a community here that refuses to let women disappear as they age. We are fighting against the silence. And I want you to stay with me until the very end of this video, because I am going to give you a set of specific diagnostic questions that will help you determine if you are just going through a phase, or if you have already entered the danger zone of identity collapse. These questions can save you years of expensive therapy if you answer them honestly. Let's talk about what is actually happening to you. This isn't just sadness. This is a structural dismantling of the ego. For decades, female identity in our culture is built on relation. You are someone's daughter, then someone's partner, then someone's mother, then someone's caretaker. Your identity is constructed like a bridge defined by what it connects to. But what happens when the land on both sides creates distance? What happens when the children leave, the parents pass away, or the spouse becomes emotionally absent? The bridge connects to nothing, and suddenly it feels like it's falling into the abyss. There are 5 specific, hidden dangers or patterns that emerge during this identity shift. These are the traps that intelligent women fall into when they are frantically trying to find solid ground. The first danger is what I call the martyr's vacuum. This occurs when a woman has spent 20 or 30 years overfunctioning for everyone else. You were the scheduler, the emotional regulator, the cook, the cleaner, the gift buyer, the peacekeeper. You prioritized everyone else's needs so consistently that you literally atrophied the muscle that allows you to know what you want. This is not a metaphor. I have had patients who cannot order off a menu at a restaurant without asking their husband what he is having, because they have lost the neural pathway to their own desire. Let me tell you about a woman named Linda. Linda was the perfect mother. She sacrificed her career in graphic design to raise 3 boys. She managed her husband's contracting business books at night. When the last boy left for college and her husband was busy with work, Linda woke up one Tuesday and realized she had nothing to do. Not just that she was bored, but that she had no purpose. Panic set in. To fill the vacuum, Linda began to obsessively insert herself into her adult sons' lives. She called them 4 times a day. She showed up at their apartments unannounced to clean. She became critical of their girlfriends because she subconsciously viewed these young women as the thieves who stole her job. The consequence was devastating. Her sons, feeling suffocated, stopped answering her calls. Her husband, seeing her erratic behavior, withdrew further. Linda, terrified of the silence, eventually fell prey to an online romance scammer simply because he asked her, "How was your day?" and made her feel needed again. She lost $40,000 and nearly lost her marriage, all because she couldn't tolerate the vacuum left by her previous role. She didn't know who she was if she wasn't the helper. Concrete rule: you cannot build a new identity on the intrusion of others' lives. You must build it on the excavation of your own. The second danger is even more subtle, and I call it the visibility crisis. This is deeply tied to how society values women based on youth and beauty. For many women, even those who weren't vain, their identity was tied to being seen. Being attractive, being capable, being the woman people turned their heads for. As menopause hits, and the physical body changes the weight gain that won't budge, the graying hair, the invisibility in public spaces, a panic sets in. It is a form of grief. You are grieving the death of the woman you saw in the mirror for 40 years. I worked with a woman named Patricia, a former pharmaceutical sales rep. High energy, very attractive, always used her charm to open doors. At 58, she was laid off. She found that she couldn't get interviews. She went to bars and realized men looked right through her to the 30-year-old behind her. Patricia's identity collapsed because it was external. She felt she had lost her currency. In a desperate attempt to regain that feeling of being seen, she began an affair with her contractor, a man 20 years her junior who had zero interest in her mind or her heart, but knew she was vulnerable. The affair was a dopamine hit. It made her feel 25 again. It made her feel like Patricia still existed. But it was a mirage. When he inevitably left, the crash was 10 times harder than the original depression. She had blown up her safety net for a fleeting glimpse of her old self. She hadn't accepted that her power had to shift from being looked at to seeing clearly. She was still trying to play a young woman's game with an older woman's wisdom, and the mismatch destroyed her self-esteem. Concrete rule: if you require external validation to feel real, you will always be a slave to whoever gives you attention. The third danger is one we rarely discuss openly because it is taboo. It is the silent resentment explosion. This happens when the identity shift reveals the unfairness of the past. You wake up at 55, look at your husband, and realize, I sacrificed my career, my body, and my dreams for this family. You sacrificed nothing. You have your career, your status, your hobbies. I have nothing. This isn't just anger. It is a retroactive rewriting of your life story, where you suddenly see yourself as the victim. This is what happened to Margaret. Margaret and her husband had a deal 30 years ago. He would work. She would manage the home. It worked, until it didn't. At 60, Margaret looked at her husband's pension and his golf trips, and felt a rage so pure it frightened her. She felt she had been duped. Her identity shifted from loving wife to exploited employee. This resentment leaked out in sarcasm, in withholding intimacy, in spending money recklessly as a way to get back what was owed to her. She didn't tell him why she was angry, because she felt guilty for changing the terms of the deal so late in the game. So, she just became bitter. The home became a war zone of silence. Her husband, confused by this change in personality, eventually filed for divorce, leaving Margaret alone with her resentment and half the assets, which was the exact opposite of what she wanted. She wanted acknowledgement, but she used punishment to get it. The danger here is letting the realization of past sacrifices poison the potential for future joy. You cannot cash in old sacrifices for new compliance. Concrete rule: unexpressed sacrifice turns into poison. You must negotiate your future, not litigate your past. The fourth danger is the desperation for aliveness. When the identity shift happens, many women feel dead inside. The routine is deadening. The predictability is suffocating. There is a desperate, clawing need to feel something, adrenaline, passion, fear, anything that isn't this grey numbness. This is the danger zone for gambling, for alcoholism, and for higher-risk financial moves. I saw this with a client named Joyce. Joyce was a librarian, a woman of extreme discipline. When she retired, the silence of her life was deafening. She felt she had been good her whole life, and where did it get her? Alone and bored. So, she started day trading. It started small, a way to feel the rush of the market. It gave her an identity: investor, risk-taker. It was a complete pivot from quiet librarian. But because she was chasing the rush, the feeling of aliveness, rather than the actual skill, she ignored safety protocols. She lost a significant portion of her retirement savings in 6 months. She was trying to buy an emotion. She was trying to buy an identity that felt exciting, to mask the one that felt fading. Concrete rule: do not use chaos to cure boredom. Find vitality in mastery, not in risk. And there is a fifth danger, perhaps the most heartbreaking of all: the premature withdrawal. This is when a woman decides that because she doesn't know who she is nothing. She looks at the world, the technology she doesn't understand, the slang she doesn't get, the pace that feels too fast, and she decides to retreat. She stops driving on highways. She stops accepting invitations to parties. She stops wearing makeup. She retreats into a small, safe radius around her house. This is the story of Eleanor. Eleanor was a vibrant community organizer in her 40s. By 62, after a health scare and the death of her sister, she decided the world was too scary and she didn't fit in it anymore. She adopted the identity of the fragile old lady decades before she was actually fragile. She used her age as a shield to avoid the hard work of reinventing herself. "I'm too old for that," she would say to everything. The tragedy is that the brain believes what you tell it. By telling herself she was incapable and irrelevant, her world shrank. Her cognitive decline accelerated because she wasn't challenging her mind. Her physical health deteriorated because she stopped moving. She essentially practiced dying for 20 years instead of living them. She mistook the confusion of identity shift for the end of the road. Concrete rule: if you shrink your world to avoid fear, you will eventually suffocate within your own safety. These patterns, the martyr's vacuum, the visibility crisis, the silent resentment, the desperation for aliveness, and the premature withdrawal are not character flaws. They are responses to a traumatic loss of self. And make no mistake, losing your identity is a trauma. It affects your health. The cortisol levels in women experiencing this shift are often sky-high, leading to insomnia, weight gain around the midsection, and autoimmune flare-ups. Your body is physically reacting to the stress of not knowing who is in charge. Furthermore, this impacts your family legacy. I have seen adult children cut contact with their mothers not because they don't love them, but because they cannot handle the mother's unmanaged identity crisis. When a mother looks to her child to provide her with a sense of self, It feels like emotional cannibalism to the child. They feel consumed. They pull away to protect their own families, and this confirms the woman's worst fear, that she is abandoned and unlovable. It is a self-fulfilling prophecy of the most painful kind. So, how do we stop this? How do we shift from a crumbling identity to a structured, resilient one? We have to look at a new model. We have to move from role-based identity to essence-based identity. The healthy alternative is what I call the second spring. In traditional Chinese medicine, menopause is called the second spring. It represents a time when the energy that was used for fertility and caretaking is returned to the woman for her own wisdom and vitality. It is not an end. It is a redirection of power. I want to tell you about a success story. Let's talk about Maria. Maria came to me in the same state as Susan Holo, confused, angry. She was 61. She had been a nurse and a mother. Both roles were gone. Instead of panicking and filling the void with noise or neediness, Maria did something brave. She sat in the discomfort. She spent 3 months journaling, not about what she did but about what she loved . She realized she loved color. She realized she loved silence. She realized she loved teaching, but not nursing. She started taking a watercolor class. She didn't try to sell her art. She just did it. She joined a literacy program to teach adults to read, a role where she was the authority, but it wasn't physical caretaking. She renegotiated her marriage, telling her husband, "I need 2 nights a week where I am not the wife, I am just Maria. I will be in the studio." Slowly, the hollow feeling filled up, not with other people's needs, but with her own essence. She became interesting to her husband again, because she was a mystery, not a servant. She became delightful to her children, because she had stories to tell them, rather than just asking them questions. She found that her identity wasn't nurse or mum. Her identity was creative, curious, teacher. That is an identity that no one can take away from her. It doesn't depend on anyone else staying or leaving. This is the goal. We want to build an identity that is weatherproof, one that stands on its own 2 feet. This brings us to the concept of your emotional legacy. I want you to look at me and really listen. You have lived too long and worked too hard to fade away in the last third of your life. You have survived childbirth, heartbreaks, careers, and loss. You are a survivor. But surviving is different than thriving. The identity you hold in your 60s and 70s is the one that will be remembered most vividly by the generation coming up behind you. Do you want to be remembered as the woman who shrank, who became bitter, who disappeared into the wallpaper? Or do you want to be remembered as the woman who, when the world told her she was done, reinvented herself? The woman who showed her daughters and granddaughters that life gets better and richer as you age. Question 1. When your phone rings and you see it's your adult child or your partner, do you feel a spark of joy, or do you feel a tightening in your chest, hoping they need you so you have something to do? Question 2. When you are alone in your house for more than 4 hours, do you feel a sense of peaceful liberty, or do you feel a creeping anxiety that you don't exist? Question 3. Are you keeping secrets about your spending, your eating, or your communications with others? Secrecy is often a desperate attempt to build a private world when the public one feels empty. Question 4. Do you find yourself constantly talking about the past, when the kids were little, when I had that job, rather than talking about next week or next year? Living in the past is the surest sign the present identity is dead. Question 5. If you could not physically care for anyone else ever again, if you couldn't cook, clean, or run errands for them, would you still feel worthy of love? If these questions stung, if they brought tears to your eyes, or if they made you defensive, then you are in the shift. You are in the gap between who you were and who you are becoming. And that is okay. The gap is where the growth happens. But you cannot stay there. You cannot camp out in the confusion. The goal is not to avoid love or relationships in later life. The goal is to bring a whole person to them. To say, I know who I am. I am a woman who loves gardening, who values honesty, who needs solitude in the mornings, and who has a lot of love to give, but none to be taken. That is a powerful energy that attracts the right kind of people, friends and partners who want you, not a nurse with a purse. You are not fading. You are distilling. You are getting rid of everything that wasn't really you, so that what remains is pure, concentrated, and undeniable. This is the work of the second half of life. It is harder than raising kids. It is harder than a career. Because it is the work of birthing yourself. I want you to take a breath. You can do this. You have everything you need inside you already.